I'm Rita McCannon. I'm so glad to see you guys again this morning. I'm still a lawyer in Huntsville, Alabama, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves, and then we want to hear who you are.
And good morning. My name's Tandy McConnell, and I'm still teaching high school in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm at still doing a little bit of writing and research and all that kind of stuff, and having a great time being here with you.
And I'm Mike Miles from Birmingham, Alabama. We've seen each other before a few times. And Tony, Mike keeps promising me that if I stay in touch with you, he would send me that hat, but he hasn't done it yet. So I'm just going to have to go get one of my own if I can find one like that. I love that hat. Rita, it's about your shade of orange. You ought to like that hat a whole lot. Tony and Mike are good friends, and 4 of you are good friends. We've been together through a lot of different competitions, so it's good to see you this morning. Thanks for having us in.
Tell us who you are.
We are Unit 2 from Fishers Junior High in Fishers, Indiana, and I'm Gurveer Gurwal, the captain of Unit 2.
I'm Malia Wright.
I'm Grant Yacht.
I'm Sydney Tongmug, and our instructors are Tony Sturgeon and Mike Fossold.
Yes, they are. I guess you know already what question is left. We're going to go over question 2, and we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us today. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson said that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. From what sources do the people derive the right to establish government? How is the consent of the government related to the concept of popular sovereignty? Does natural rights philosophy justify a right to revolution? Why or why not? Why might the principles and practices of self-government contained in the Declaration of Independence have been considered radical at the time? You may begin.
The people are able to establish their own government, and they derive that right from the Lockean prerogative in the Declaration of Independence. John Locke's concept of the natural rights of life, liberty, and property influenced Thomas Jefferson's unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the Lockean prerogative, Locke argued that the people have the right to establish their own government if their current government infringes too heavily on their natural rights. This can be seen in the Declaration of Independence's list of 27 grievances. These grievances spelled out all the reasons colonists believed they should become independent from the king and from Parliament. Thomas Jefferson, who was heavily influenced by Locke, clearly had these concepts in mind while writing the Declaration. He wrote, "Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it." This concept is known as popular sovereignty, government created and sustained by the people, and in order for it to be sustained, the people must justify its power, which is called the consent of the governed.
Consent of the governed relates to popular sovereignty because they're both based on the idea of people having power and willfully following the decisions made by the general population, whether that be a city, state, nation, or group of nations like the European Union or United Nations. They are all dependent on the states consenting to be governed and accepting some infringement of their natural rights in the name of the common good. Furthermore, there is the idea that popular sovereignty cannot function without consent of the governed. By definition, popular sovereignty means consent. The authority of a state and its government are created and sustained by the consent of its people. Without consent, governments would not have legitimate authority over its people. One key part of both governments is the need for representatives. In elections, people give consent to be governed. The representative's job is to voice the wants and concerns of the people of their district, state, or nation.
John Locke states that our natural rights are those of life, liberty, and property. In John Locke's second treatise, he wrote, "The people have the right to act as supreme and continue the legislative in themselves, or erect a new form, or under the old form places in new hands, as they think good." The Declaration of Independence justified revolution since the unalienable rights were being violated. Therefore, the people had the right to alter or to abolish it. The Declaration also goes on to state that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, followed by a list of justifications in breaking away from Great Britain, which included he has refused to pass laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, and he has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. The natural rights made by John Locke and accepted by the founders further indicates that there is a justification if necessary. The grievances and natural rights did justify a revolution, the American Revolution itself.
The principles and practices of ideas such as self-government that are included in the Declaration of Independence were considered radical at the time for a number of reasons. First, the concept that all men are created equal was extreme, especially in Europe, where status was tied to the old ideas of feudalism and land. Another revolutionary belief was that governments are instituted among men, and not that governments were instituted by a divine right of kings. In the Declaration of Independence, the founders documented their ideas on a new government, which included the idea of that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. The idea that the people could destroy or change the government was a belief that John Locke first wrote in his writings about a right to revolution. This begs the question, were the events of January 6th the use of a right to rebellion? We have now finished our testimony and are now ready for follow-up.
In what way, if you know, is the idea of the social contract related to the right to establish government? Did y'all study that?
Yeah, we did. When government is established, there is this kind of unspoken social contract that the people will give up a small bit of their life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, a small bit of their unalienable rights in return for protection and order from the government.
Can you give some examples of what those rights might be? What am I giving up in order to live in a secure society?
Well, go ahead, Gabriel.
Okay. Well, in certain cases, like if you break a law, you give up the right. You give up the right to live freely because you go to jail. Also, you can give up rights, like harming other people, and which could be a right if there is no government. So those kind of rights are given up for the protection of the people as a whole, and then more rights can be taken away from you if you violate the rights.
Modern day example of this would be our mask mandates that we have here in the States, or we had here in the States, and the idea that you have to wear your mask in order for protection of others. And for some, it's not an ideal thing, but it's a need, and it's by our government as like a law. As a citizen, you must follow that at the moment.
I think a perfect example of a small liberty or unalienable right that we have to give up being a part of a government is taxes. Nobody wants to pay them, but when we are in a country and that's what we do, we have to give up that small part of us.
Adding on to what Gabir said earlier, we have to give up a lot of our right to pursuit of happiness if what makes us happy are illegal things like tax fraud or stealing other people's property, which is illegal, and we could serve jail time, which would be infringe on our right to liberty.
Great. I think you can keep on going all day on that. That's awesome. Let me pass the baton.
Grant, I just wish you hadn't mentioned the mask. I was having a good time until you talked about the mask. I hate wearing mine, but I'm gonna have to wear it now because of what you just said. I'm gonna have to. Let's talk a second about the Declaration when Jefferson wrote these powerful words that the government can't govern unless we agree, unless we voted for them, unless we picked them. Then he goes, the Constitution is written, and it promises us all equal protection under the law. All of us get equally treated. But if a person in Illinois can register on the day of the election and vote that day, if a person in Illinois can mail in their ballot and know they've got plenty of time to get it there, and if the Indiana legislature, like the Alabama legislature is doing, does away with same-day voting and does away with mail-in ballots, or it shortens the runoff period where a mail-in ballot won't get there. So you're going to have a harder time getting your vote cast than your cousin in Illinois would. Has the Constitution failed you in giving you equal protection under the law if it's harder for you to vote, harder for you to consent to be governed than your cousin in Illinois would have?
Well, I would say that would be more of a state constitution, state government decision opposed to the Constitution as a whole, which overall they would, I assume, want things to be as equal as possible. But when it comes down to it, the overall Constitution doesn't normally override the state decisions themselves.
Is that okay, though? You're right, they don't. But is that, I'm not asking just her, I'm asking the panel. She can answer, but all of you can if you want to. Is that okay for the US Constitution to not protect me by giving those rights to 50 states instead of keeping that to themselves? Keeping
I
that,
actually disagree a bit with Malia on that, because while it is a state right on whether or not your mail-in ballots will come in at a certain time, this is a national election. It decides the leader for everyone. So everyone should have an equal chance to vote, I think.
I agree with Malia. A way of like right to rebellion would be that we elect new officials every 2 years for local government and 4 for a national government. And to take away that voting right would be to take away your rights in rebellion.
I agree with Sydney in that she's saying that everybody should have equal opportunities to vote, as it is a vote for the whole country, and that should be more of a federal issue than a state's deciding what their people should vote with, because it decides the fate of the whole country instead of just one state.
yeah.
So
Rita,
yeah,
we've
it's
got-
kind of,
Go
Oh,
ahead,
sorry.
Maria, I'm sorry.
gonna
Go
say-
ahead, I'm sorry. Rita, we got 2 votes on one side and 2 on the other. This is headed for a runoff, it looks like. Go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Malia.
I was just gonna say, to wrap up this question, we honestly think state being able to kind of like override the country itself. We really don't think that should work if you think about it, but it just kind of is how it is.
That's how it is.
I'm going to ask you what you thought about Major League Baseball moving the All-Star game from Atlanta for a similar reason. And did you realize that they were trying to support everyone's right to vote? Did you realize that in the current events, and you may not follow it since you live a little farther away from Atlanta than we do, but that Major League Baseball had moved the All-Star game this summer specifically because the state of Georgia chose to change their voting laws, and just the same as Mike said, our state of Alabama is trying to do the same thing. Let me get us back on topic. You all have answered almost all of our questions, but what is the significance of asserting the concept of popular sovereignty? What's the significance? I think you may have already gone over it for me. Some. Can you tell us?
Well, popular sovereignty is basically the exact concept of consent of the governed and social contract, and the whole idea of the government is the definition of popular sovereignty. Government sustained, established by the people, which can be seen through the Declaration of Independence.
Okay. Let me
We
follow
also
that. I'm sorry, let me follow that real quickly because I think we're going to be close on time. Right now, okay, you don't get to vote for another 3 or 4 or 5 years. Have you given your consent to be governed, and how do you give your consent to be governed? Good question.
I do not believe that I have given my consent to be governed, as I don't think I am represented in anything like Congress. Like, you do not see any 13-year-old people in Congress right now. So I cannot fully say that my needs and my rights are being represented.
So you're saying if somebody my age in Congress says, well, I'll represent the best interest of 13-year-olds, how would you respond to them?
Well, I can't vote, so I can't really respond to that.
Ooh, smackdown. Go ahead.
I would say that I am represented in the idea that I do have my rights, and like all the amendments still apply to me without age. So I would say, even though I may not be able to vote in an election, I still am gifted rights by our government.
Great ending there.
That was fun to watch.
You guys
Yeah,
think a
you
whole
did
lot
some
better
acting.
than I did. I always thought that if I thought the same way my parents did, I must be getting represented if they voted for the right people. I guess I didn't have it right. Y'all have already thought this thing through. So very, very nice job. We enjoyed it.
It was a great presentation, a great argument. I like the way. I mean, sometimes I'll see teams and they'll disagree with each other, and it's kind of staged. You look like, I mean, you might have staged it, but if you did, you look like it was very real, and you use that as a way to present more information and more ideas. So you weren't just saying, yeah, he's wrong. You were saying, well, here's another way to look at it. This is also important, and so both sides of all these debates presented crucially important information. I thought that was just pretty awesome.
Yeah, when Dr. McConnell was saying that, sometimes it's staged, and Malia, I love that. No, it wasn't staged. We really disagree with each other. We really do. That was wonderful. I love that reaction. That was great. Rita asked one of her questions, and she said, did y'all study that? And I knew what the answer was going to be to that. With the two teachers you have, I know you studied that. I know that was an important enough thing where you studied that. I can't tell you how much I admire those two guys, and I wish I had 1/10 of their talent. I thought your essay was out of this world. I thought it was better. Tim can tell you, Maria can tell you. Maria was probably listening in on the hearings last week. We heard a lot of fine high school team essays last week, but I'll guarantee you there was a large percent of them that were not as good as the one that you just gave us. I wish I had a copy of it that I could just sit and read it. It was really good. Two more thoughts. Tony said something right a minute ago. He said, we just wanted to talk to you, so talk. Tony, they didn't just talk, they said something. They actually said some very powerful responses to what we were trying to give as pretty hard questions. The last thing is Rita and I kind of have a special, I'm just going to tell you this and then we'll quit. Rita and I have a special place in our heart for your school. The last time that we got to be in Leesburg, we judged Fishers the last morning. And then we were all leaving to catch our planes, but y'all had a late plane and we did too. And we were waiting for a cab outside the hotel. And y'all loaded up on your bus, that team did, and they were going to go sightseeing. And they said, y'all want to ride to town with us? And the kids did. And we said, well, yeah. And so y'all pulled us up on the bus and shared your lunch with us. Mike, you remember that? They shared lunch with us, and we went, so we took pictures with them in front of the Capitol. I wouldn't take anything in the world for those pictures. I still have them. But we felt like we were honorary Fishers students that day. I'd give anything in the world if I'd gone to your school and had these two guys teach me this stuff at your age.
They weren't
Go
born
vote.
yet.
Do what? Yeah,
They weren't born yet.
That's right. No, they weren't. Yeah, Tony and Mike weren't born yet. I know what you're saying. But if they, I don't know, Mike may have been born in, Tony wasn't, but Mike could have been born in. That's possible, I guess. Stay in touch with these two guys. Don't just benefit from this experience. Stay in touch with them in high school. Stay in touch with them in college. When you land your first job, call them and tell them where you are. They'll be as excited as you are. But these are two great role models that you can talk to for a long time and gather insight from, like we gathered from you today. Y'all worked hard to be able to do this today, and we loved it. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you guys very much for judging, and especially
Mike.
Mike. I know you're not feeling great. That says a lot. So thank you very much.
I
You guys enjoy the rest of your day. It's always a
Hey,
pleasure.
Mike, do you remember the fact that we went ahead and recited Invictus to you? And my kids were so impressed because you actually knew the poem.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that, Mike. I remembered. I said it along with them. We sure did.
Yeah.
I remember that. I knew every word.
They were so struck by that because that poem is everything about our class.
Yeah.
And you remembered that. And that
William?
stuck to them.
William Ernest Henley. That was the most famous thing he ever wrote. We stood in front of the Capitol, Mike, and recited. We standing in a circle, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. I thank you for reminding me of that. I'll meet y'all at the Capitol one day if y'all will let me know when you're going to be there. And Tandy and Rita will come with me, and we'll do the poem again.
We would love that. Thank you, judges, so much for loving our kids. I appreciate you.
We do love them. We love y'all too. Thanks.